would be introduction of bills. And Senator Faust-Godot, do you have a bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have a bill and I have another request. So which would you prefer first?
Let's do your bill introduction.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. I have a bill request for RS number 1062. And I believe Ms. Connie already has this for medical marijuana and healthcare.
Thank you. Is there any questions on the bill introduction? Any objection to the bill introduction? Seeing none, bill will be introduced. And you had a second request?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I initially introduced a bill for which was 21 RS 0448, but I am now requesting that or formally withdrawing my request for that legislation. It's already been introduced in the House, and I believe it's had a hearing over there. And so to save money and time, we don't need to have that bill drafted as a Senate version.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the request? I do think that bill is already going to be assigned to us, so we'll take care of that. Thank you. And seeing none, the bill, removing that bill will be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the item on our agenda today is Senate Bill 84, authorizing sports wagering under the Kansas Expanded Lottery Act. And we'll have a staff briefing. Jason?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just to refresh your memory, Senate Bill 84 is the bill to authorize sports wagering in Kansas to be conducted through the management contracts with lottery gaming facility managers. These are the casino managers operating in the state. If within 2 years after passage of this bill, there is no more than one manager who has agreed to conduct sports wagering, then the Kansas Lottery may do so on its own behalf. The bill contains several provisions regarding the conduct of sports wagering, including the use of up to 3 what are called interactive sports wagering platforms. Those would be the online and mobile application formats for placing wagers. There's also provisions in there for regulating advertisements for sports wagering, restricting certain individuals from placing wagers, maintaining records of wagers that are placed, cooperating with the Kansas Lottery and the Racing and Gaming Commission and law enforcement officials in any investigations of suspicious activity. The sports wagering revenues would all come into the state and then would be transferred to the specific accounts for each casino manager within the sports wagering receipts fund. The state would retain 7.5% of those wagers that are placed in person at a casino and 10% of the revenues for those sports wagers that are placed, excuse me, through a sports wagering platform. The bill would create a white-collar crime fund to be administered by the governor. The Attorney General and the Racing and Gaming Commission could submit requests for budgetary needs to the governor each year to request funding for prosecuting and investigating crimes involving the illegal use of funds derived from gambling activities. The bill makes an amendment to some criminal statutes to exclude sports wagering as an unlawful bet and to increase the penalty level for sports bribery and tampering with a sports contest. The bill then makes several conforming amendments to the Expanded Lottery Act to authorize sports wagering by lottery gaming facility managers, and that act, including key definitions and authorizations for adoption of rules and regulations to regulate sports wagering. There's also provisions to prohibit certain online lottery games so that there's no confusion with sports wagering conducted online. There's provision for the first $750,000 of sports wagering revenue each year to go to that white collar crime fund to be used for investigation and prosecution of white collar crimes. And I believe the remainder of the bill is largely just making conforming amendments to the KELA statutes for sports wagering. And then there's finally, on the last page of the bill, there's an amendment to increase the annual transfer to the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund from $80,000 a year to $100,000 a year. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions concerning what we've heard? Seeing no questions, we'll open up for comments. Senator Longbine.
Chairman, thank you. I do have a series of amendments that I would like to propose to the committee. The first one, Connie, is a technical amendment.
Do you have a number on that?
Jason, can you, I don't.
That would be number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I asked for the bill to be drafted, one of the changes that I made from last year was to increase the skins or the number of platforms from 2 to 3, and I did that on page 1 of the bill. I inadvertently missed that same change from 2 to 3 on page 29. So that's all the amendment does, is change to make sure that the language is the same. And then also in proofing the bill on page 2, line 6, we need to insert the word "to." And that's all this amendment does. More technical in nature.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Committee, we would entertain a motion.
I would move that we adopt the amendment, adopt the balloon.
The motion made by Senator Longbine and seconded by Senator Peterson to adopt the amendment with the changes identified. Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Amendment passes. Senator Longbine, do you have another amendment?
I do. This one is number 7. Chairman, this amendment is really kind of cleaning up the terms and definitions, but if I could I ask Jason to take us through it?
Yes, sir. Jason, are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, balloon amendment number 7 does a lot of amendments and cleaning up some of the language. I will point out the substantive policy pieces, however, on page 1, lines 20 through 22, you see that language is stricken so that sports wagering would be conducted solely through the lottery gaming facility managers. There is no longer an option for sports wagering by the Kansas Lottery on its own behalf. On page 2 of the amendment, there in lines 6 through 9, you see new language being proposed that just clarifies that the sports wagering manager can enter into a contract with an interactive sports wagering platform, and that the contract has to be approved by the Kansas Lottery. These other amendments are cleaning up language, largely to refer to a sports wagering manager throughout the new sections, which is a lottery gaming facility manager that is agreed by contract to conduct sports wagering. I will point out the next substantive amendment is on page 35 of the balloon towards the end. And on this page, you see there's a new section, there's a section 26 being added to the bill. This would amend an existing statute. Currently, you cannot extend credit to patrons of a lottery gaming facility. This amendment would create an exception to allow a patron to create an account to be held by the sports wagering manager for payment of sports wagers. And then lists accepted forms of payment to fund that account. And so that would be an exception for sports wagering from the general prohibition on extending credit. I believe, yeah, that is it on the substantive amendments. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Jason, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, thank you for that explanation. My question on the balloon is on page 14. You didn't really discuss it very much, but I just want to clarify something on here. It says any licensed gaming facility in the United States. And I realize that it has to be in Kansas, so it has to be a facility in Kansas. Just because of the geofencing. But my question now goes to, I have down in southeast Kansas, there is a tribal casino in Oklahoma that actually has a parking lot in Kansas and some other structures. Does this open that up to them to now be a gaming facility, to have this type of access?
No, what this definition does is it operates to define what games can be offered in a lottery gaming facility under the Expanded Lottery Act. And currently, it's electronic gaming machines, which are slot machines, and then other games that are authorized at a tribal gaming facility. Is kind of, which is basically what we call Class 3 games. And what the bill does is strike that specific reference to state statute and replace it with broader language to be any games that are authorized to be conducted or operated at any licensed gaming facility in the United States. As I read the bill, that is in reference to any casino operating in the United States. So if it's a general game authorized at a casino in the United States, then it's a lottery facility game for purposes of the Expanded Lottery Act. That's how I'm reading that language. And so it's I don't know in practice how expansive that language actually is in terms of broadening the types of games that can be offered at lottery facilities. But that is the change that is being proposed by Senate Bill 84.
Any other questions? Seeing none, what are your wishes on this? Oh, wait a minute, excuse me. Senator Falscadeau.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, the carrier of this balloon amendment. So on page 6, did you cover the change on page 6? So I was just curious, Mr. Chairman, Senator Longmire, so the striking of that lottery gaming facility, I know last year when we had the hearing, there was some kind of concern there. Did that issue get worked out?
Senator
Or-
Fusco, I believe the change on page 6 is just changing the terminology from lottery gaming facility to a sports wagering manager.
Gotcha. Okay, so just,
Senator Longline, we've seen that all through the,
We have,
okay,
they changed the terms, so.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I might also mention on this particular amendment and my next one, there is a consortium of facility gaming managers and platform managers and whatever that have been working extensively. And it's my understanding that they are all in agreement on this amendment. And so at the appropriate time, I would have moved the amendment.
one more time on the questions or comments on this amendment. Seeing none, you may move your amendment.
I'll move the balloon.
Do we have a second? We have a second by Senator Ware. The amendment number 7 has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment passes. Do we have another amendment?
I do. I have 2 more.
Pass.
The next one is number 8. And Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you, I'd like to ask Jason to explain the balloon.
It is. And Jason, are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I put up the amendment here on the screen. Number 8 makes several amendments to clean up language and make some adjustments to language concerning the interactive sports wagering platforms, the online and mobile application, software applications for placing wagers electronically. You'll see the first off, there are a few amendments throughout the bill to add commercially whenever there's direction for a sports wagering manager or a platform to take reasonable measures. There's a qualification there that they be commercially reasonable measures. Then on page 3 of the bill, you'll see there's amendments up at the top regarding advertisements to allow the sports wagering manager or the platform to include their company name, trade name, or brand name in any such advertisements that are disclosing the entity involved in the advertisement. And then towards the bottom of that page 3, there is a general prohibition on allowing a platform director, officer, owner, employee, or any relative living in the household of any of those people from placing sports wagers. The language you see amended there on page 3 would clarify that to allow such persons to place a wager with a sports wagering manager or platform that they're not affiliated with. So it's not a blanket prohibition against placing sports wagers in Kansas, simply a prohibition of placing a sports wager with the casino or the platform that that person is associated with to prevent that conflict of interest. There's some other cleanup language on page 4. On page 5, you see an amendment This is in the provision to calculate if there is a negative sports wagering revenue for a reporting period. And the amendment would clarify that in calculating that amount, not only do you include the winnings paid to the patrons who wagered on sports, but also any voided wagers and any excise taxes levied pursuant to federal law is all calculated in that total cost that's deducted off of the total revenues to determine whether or not you have a positive or negative revenue balance for that reporting period. There's an amendment on page 13. I believe this came from the industry to clarify the definition of interactive sports wagering platform. I think this more clarifies the function of those platforms compared to what's under the bill currently. More clarification on page 17 of a sporting event also includes not just teams, but individuals or team involved in team other events involving individuals or team competition besides those that are specifically listed there in 17. Some cleanup language on 18, just to clarify that it's a sports wagering manager that's conducting sports wagering through an interactive sports wagering platform. On page 20, you see some clarifying language there. The bill currently permits a patron to have a pre-established online account with a platform that is operating already in another state. The amendment on page 20 and line 32 would allow for the establishment of new online sports wagering accounts for sports wagering in Kansas. So it would be both establishing new ones and allowing pre-established accounts from other states to be accessed for sports wagering purposes. And then at the bottom of 20 is the same amendment regarding negative sports wagering revenue calculation. Page 37 is the same amendment you saw earlier on allowing platform personnel to place wagers with non-affiliated casinos and platforms. And that, Mr. Chairman, is the amendment. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions? Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, just say what you said again on page 3,
Okay.
line 7, number 2. So did you say that, so if I work for one of the entities, so the people who reside in my home are forbidden to make a bet? So just explain that one more time for me. Thank you.
Sure. The prohibition on page 3, starting in line 27, prohibits a director, officer, owner, or employee of a sports wagering platform. So the company that's providing the application service to place online wagers, any of those employees, owners, managers, directors would be prohibited from placing a wager with the casino that they have a contract with or through their own platform. It also prohibits any relative who's living in the same household as that person. So if you have, adult children, you have, grandparents living in that same household, those individuals would also be prohibited. Spouses would also be prohibited. The amendment on page 3 clarifies that the prohibition only applies to the casino that the platform has a contract with or the platform itself. That they could still place wagers with another casino through another platform that the person is not affiliated or associated with.
Senator Peterson.
Yeah, Jason, I don't know if this is for you or for the senator from Lyon, but on page 17 where we're adding in the term amateur, what type of sports are we trying to add in there? What are we expanding the coverage to?
I'm not sure, but amateur can be applied to sports. Like most Olympic activities are amateur activities, and they involve individuals over the age of 18, such as, U.S. Olympic swim trials, something of that sort. would not be a professional sport, would not be a collegiate sport, would in fact be an amateur sport. And so I guess it would allow sports wagering on events such as that.
Thank you.
Senator Dietrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had an amendment on page 17 for high school sports where we had put a period.
Right. We're on this amendment,
This one
and
first.
then we'll come back to that one. Thank you.
Thank you very
Are there any other questions? Any comments on this that we want to add at this time? If not, Senator Longbine,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we adopt balloon number 8.
we have a second. We have a second by Senator Peterson, then we adopt balloon amendment number 8. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Amendment passes. I believe we have another amendment.
Jason, I'm going to need help. This is the Humane Society amendment. I don't know the number.
Jason, do you have a number on that?
Yeah, it is number 2.
Number 2, and we will pass that out. Senator Longbine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an amendment.
I think pardon me, I think Jason was going to explain that.
Okay, go ahead,
Jason.
Jason.
Mr. Chairman, members committee, balloon number 2 makes an amendment on page 17 to the definition of a sporting event. The amendment would strike the reference to the Parimutuel Racing Act so that sporting events would exclude any greyhound race. So this would prohibit sports wagering on any greyhound race, regardless of what entity or what regulation was overseeing that greyhound race.
Are there any questions? Comments? Seeing none? Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adopt balloon number 2.
We have a second. Questions first? Second. Senator Dietrich, second that. Questions, comments? You moved your amendment. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Amendment passes. And do you have any more?
Chairman, I am done.
You're done. Okay. At this time, I think that we would. Okay, Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final question for Jason. So again, what is the dollar amount that would come to the state? I mean,
There
I
are
know.
varying amounts on sports wagering revenues simply because it's been difficult, I think, to estimate the total amount of wagers that are going to be placed. I think my recollection is it's between, say, $7 and $12 million would come to the state, I think, were the numbers I was hearing. I might defer to Joanna if she has some numbers at her fingertips on what's been estimated.
Joanna? Joanna, are you online?
Mr. Chairman, since we, because I have just another question while we're waiting on Joanna. Jason, while we're waiting on,
I'm back. Just give me 1 second. I can pull up the fiscal note and see what that says.
We've got another question for it. Go ahead and pull that note up, and we're going back to Jason. Senator Faust-Godot, you have a question for Jason.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Jason, I really like the fund that was established by Senator Hildebrand in the legislation what are we calling it, white collar fund, and we went from 80 to 100,000. I like it. I just wanted to be clear again on how it would be utilized.
The bill as it currently stands creates a white collar crime fund for the prosecution and investigation of crimes, financial crimes related to sports wagering and illicit use of the funds derived from that. It would be used by the Attorney General and the Racing and Gaming Commission to perform that function. And it would be funded by the first $750,000 in sports wagering revenue brought into the state each year.
Mr. Chairman, I thought, wasn't there a piece on there that helped youth? A scholarship to them or something?
There was an amendment last year for a scholarship fund, but that's not in the bill currently.
I think we have a couple more amendments on this, so we'll move forward to Senator Peterson.
Yes, mine's amendment number 9. It's going to address some of what Senator Fasquito just explained.
Okay, we'll pass that out if it's okay, Jason.
Do you want me to explain it first or let Jason go?
Let's Jason explain it, and then we'll come back for you for comments.
Excellent.
Jason, can you explain that as soon as we get that?
Was this number 9, Mr. Chairman?
Get
Is
that
this
passed out.
amendment number 9? I didn't hear the senator.
Yes, amendment number 9.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, amendment number 9 does 4 things. The first thing it does is I'll direct your attention to attachment A on the second to last page of the balloon. This would establish a new section 11 in the bill, and this would establish the Combating White Collar Crimes and Information Technology Scholarship Fund that you may recall was offered and amended onto the bill last year by Senator Hildebrand. This is a scholarship fund to fund scholarships for students enrolled in degree programs in the field of combating white collar crimes and information technology that addresses electronic security. There is additional language in here that the State Board of Regents has provided to provide a clawback requiring the student to work in Kansas in these fields for a certain amount of time or else pay back the scholarship funds. It also requires the student to be enrolled in the program of study described by the scholarship, combating white collar crimes or information technology in order to do that. So that fund is established. The bill then on pages 21 and 22, the amendment proposes a distribution of all the sports wagering revenues that are coming to the state. So this is the amount, the 7.5% or 10% of sports wagering revenues retained by the state is what we're talking about here. And so the first $750,000 is still going to the white collar crime prosecution investigation fund as currently in the bill. After that amount is transferred to that fund, then the remaining revenues throughout the year are to be split 4 ways. 20% is to go into the scholarship fund that I just described. 20% is to go into the problem gambling and addictions grant fund. 20% is to go into a family and children investment fund held by the judicial branch to be expended for purposes of court-appointed special advocate program. That's the CASA program to provide special advocates for students, particularly students in foster care who have a number of court dates. And then the final 40% would be used for community behavioral health clinics program under the Department of Aging and Disability Services. The next 2 provisions, this amendment.
Jason,
I'm sorry, yes.
could I stop you there for just one moment? And the question I have there is, and I think that needs to be clarified, and that is that 20% and all those 20 and 40% that we identified there, is that of the total fund, or is that of just the first 750?
That's after the 750 is paid out.
Okay,
So in July, we start counting the revenues, and when we get the 750,000, the Director of Accounts and Reports will immediately send that over to the White Collar Crimes Fund. After that, each month, the director is going to transfer a percentage of whatever revenues come in after that to these four funds or programs.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Proceed.
I'll direct your attention to the last page of the balloon. This is attachment B. This amends the statute creating the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. Excuse me. The first part of this, I will direct your attention down in the middle of the attachment. There's a provision that would require 12% of all monies credited to this fund be expended for the treatment, research, education, or prevention of pathological gambling. Pardon me. The remainder of the amendments are to ensure that pathological gambling is treated with funds from this program, and that the monies in the fund cannot be used for any other purpose by the state or the state legislature. So that is amendment balloon number 9. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jason. We've just passed out what we heard, committee, from the Problem Gambling Fund and the breakdown of problem gambling. And so you'll see how that since 2012 and then projected into 2022, how the money is projected to be spent. And I would ask, this amendment would change the distribution of those funds. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, and that it would earmark 12% of those funds specifically for addressing problems with pathological gambling. So there would be a fixed amount of those funds would have to be directed to those purposes. It would also require that part of those monies be used to fund a helpline for gambling problems and other addiction problems with text and chat capabilities. And then the remaining portions of the funding could be used as they currently are by the agency.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Jason? Yes, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This might be more for the carrier of the amendment than Jason, because it's more policy driven. But as I understand the balloon on page 22, this would direct 100% of all gaming, sports gaming revenue after the $750,000 to these four buckets.
I will ask the carrier of the amendment. Senator
Yes.
Peterson.
So there would be no increase in SGF. And has there been any discussion with these four entities to see if they could even spend $2 to $4 million per year if they were giving it to them?
I did not discuss with the White Collar Crimes Fund or the Regents, but I have discussed with some of the folks on the Community Behavioral Health Clinics program. The amendment that I started off with was to add the 2% in, like we did last year on the floor, and then have the rest of it go to other behavioral health programs. That was passed, I think, 38-0 on the floor. With discussion of some others, they thought that I ought to designate where it goes so that we'll know we'll have it. You know, if you have this money going to CASA, you know, maybe you could supplant some of that with other SGF funds. But this lets us know that those programs are receiving their funding.
Are there any other questions? Senator Hildebrand.
Not a question, Mr. Chairman, but just a follow-up on tagging along with Senator Peterson's explanation. The white-collar crime, combating white-collar crime scholarship is something that they could use. I've talked to the Flanders of the Board of Regents, and they're for it. And I also had discussions with some of the other parties along, and And they are in very much support of it because they are in need of dedicated funds on an annual basis instead of whether or not they get a grant or not in a lot of situations.
Senator Faust-Cadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish I would have thought of this amendment. Wow, I like it. CASA getting that funding would certainly be beneficial, and so I'm going to second that.
I've got a question for carrier amendment. So we're talking about 2% of the money for problem gambling from the existing agreement. Is that correct?
Your testimony that we were wanting to, we needed to get 2% in. And as Jason, I may be wrong, but the 20% of the 10%, the remaining is 2%. So that was as close as I could get on the problem gaming fund. You want to explain that formula, Jason? Step right in.
Senator, I believe last year's amendment was 2% of the sports wagering revenues for the state. And so it was reducing the state. If you look at like the 10% for online wagers, the state will get 8%, and problem gambling addiction will have gotten the other 2% from those revenues, which is equivalent to 20% of the total sports wagering revenues that's proposed under the amendment. So I think the amount going to problem gambling addictions grant fund is probably similar between last year's amendment that was adopted on the floor and the one being proposed here.
Right, and last year, the one on the floor, the one that I initially started off with would have had, the other monies remaining going to behavioral health programs, and we just thought it would be better to specify them out.
I want to thank you for that explanation. I want to call our attention to the problem gambling handout that we had. It totaled $8 million is what we get in normally. This bill that which we're talking about would add approximately $100,000 a year, is my understanding, to that number. If you look what went to problem gambling last year, or proposed in 2022, it's $263,000. Medicaid mental health expenditures was $4 million. We had transfer to community corrections, and we had transfer to the governor's office. We had KDAD's program. Have you talked to these programs?
I have not.
Okay. Senator Dietrich.
So I'm just going to say what I'm feeling here. I think that these are all great programs, but I am uncomfortable taking the additional dollars that we're going to probably, be able to allocate through this new bill as it currently stands, and then appropriating them 100% without any input from Ways and Means or the House Appropriations piece makes me uncomfortable. Not that these aren't good programs and that this isn't a good plan, but since the beginning of the discussion of this bill, it's been SGF and problem gambling and this white collar crime. So taking a detour at this point makes me uncomfortable. Not that these aren't good programs. I support them 100%, but do we want to put 100% of the dollars into them now in this bill? That's my only, a caution. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Faust-Cadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but wouldn't those state general funds that we're speaking of, wouldn't they eventually go to these programs that are in the amendment?
Going to ask carrier the bill. Is that the intent?
It would be my intent that they go to these programs. My intent was last year we had on the floor one that locked it down and said that it went to behavioral health programs. Some of those funds were being moved around to other areas, and I just wanted to pick some programs and ensure that they had the money going to them.
Any further comments? Senator Ware.
Okay, I'm going to start everything that I'm saying here in, I personally don't understand gambling just for myself, and that's all fine. I can put that aside. But we are giving people the opportunity to do something that could very much destroy their lives. I mean, recreationally, but nonetheless, there are a lot of things in life that can happen that way. And our state general fund isn't benefiting at all. And these things are locked with no flexibility to potentially add another program that, or I'm having a lot of trouble with a lot of moving parts here that don't seem to fit. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I think Senator Hildebrand, do you have a question or comment?
No question, just comments. You know, I understand some people's angst over certain things, but let's put this into perspective. This isn't the first bill that the legislature has tried to pass that designated funding to a specific source. There are 9 senators out of 40 that sit on Ways and Means. To imply that those 9 senators are the only ones capable of allocating money for the state, I don't agree with that. I think there are 40 senators. We all should have a say. This is part of the process. If this goes to the floor and 40 senators don't like it, they can amend it out. If 5 senators on this committee don't like it, it doesn't get put on. That is part of the process. To try to say or try to imply that only the Ways and Means has the authority to put funding and designate funding, I just do not agree with at all. The second part is Senator Ware made a very good point. Problem gaming is a problem. That is why this amendment is proposed. I would suppose with the carrier of the amendment, this designates that funding to those areas to help those. Thank you.
I'm going to ask another question of the carrier of the bill. The total number that we're talking about for the problem gaming fund would be allocated per this amendment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we're not talking about the total SGF. Is that
Not talking about total the SGF.
just the total of the problem gaming 2% that is in the original bill? That's what you're talking about.
That's what the 20% would be that goes to the problem gaming fund, yes.
I wanted to clarify that to make sure that there was some question about all the SGF, and I want to make sure that was correct. Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, may move your bill.
Move my amendment.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Motion's been made by Senator Peterson, seconded by Senator Faust-Godot. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do you want to be recorded? Did, okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion passed. Okay. We're going to ask for hands. For all in favor of this bill? Of the amendment, excuse me. Opposed this 4-3. Amendment fails. Senator Peterson?
I've requested another amendment from Jason that was identical to the one we had last year. I haven't seen it yet, but I do have that request in.
We do have several other amendments, I think, that...
Identical to the floor amendment that was passed last year.
We do have several other amendments we'll go through, and then hopefully Jason can get that to us on that. Thank you. Are there any other amendments? Senator Dietrich?
Is that number 1, Jason, the high school one?
Yes, that amendment is balloon number 1.
I'll just quickly explain this to you while Connie's passing this out. On page 17, I made mention of it earlier. We're trying to make sure that high schools are not involved in any sports wagering regardless of age. And so if you look at page 17, the balloon just strikes on line 40 and 41, unless the majority of the participants in the sporting or athletic event are 18 years of age or older. We're just striking that. We're putting a period so that any sporting or athletic event played by individuals that are at the high school level or below, period, are disqualified from any sports wagering.
Thank you. Jason, do you have any comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, no, it basically just would prohibit any sports wagering on any high school level or below events. And so anything that's considered that by the Kansas Lottery would be prohibited from placing any wagers on.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was one of my concerns early on, addressing the issue, and so I appreciate that you've kind of cleared it up, because some individuals in high school are 17. I graduated when I was 17, and so they're 18, but you're still in high school, so I appreciate this amendment. Thank you.
Being passed out, and you have in your hands a letter from the executive director of the Kansas High School Activity Association, Mr. Bill Falick, and they are opposed to having betting on any high school activity. So you just have that letter in your hand. Okay. With that, are there any questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, you may move your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I move my amendment.
Second? We have a second. Second by Senator Peterson. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Do we have any other amendments? Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had requested from Jason the day after we had the hearing an amendment to duplicate the amendment that we had last year on Senate Bill 283.
Jason, do we have that one?
Due to a miscommunication among parties, I do not have the exact amendment drafted, but I can certainly explain the amendment, I think, to the committee's satisfaction for their consideration at today's meeting.
So with that, can we call this a conceptual amendment?
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jason, explain the amendment.
Sure. What the amendment would do is get to the right page in the bill here. Sure, we get this. So the amendment first on page 29 of the bill, if you look towards the bottom of the page, you'll see the percentages for the state's retention of sports wagering revenues. Those amounts would be reduced by 2%. Off of each amount. So it would be 5.5% of wagers placed in person and 8% of sports wagering revenues placed through a sports wagering platform. The 2% that's being reduced there would be transferred to the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. This is the amendment that was offered and adopted on the Senate floor in last year's Senate Bill 283. So along with that change in the percentages for sports wagering revenues, you would also have an amendment that would look very similar to what was attachment B on the last balloon number 9, where you're amending the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. The only difference in Senator Peterson's current amendment is you would not have a 12% earmark for pathological gambling under his amendment that he's offering right now. All the other language on that balloon number 9, attachment B, is part of his amendment.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Are there any questions concerning the amendment? If not, Senator Peterson, you may move your amendment.
As was stated, this is the one that passed the Senate floor last year, I believe 38-0. I move my amendment.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded on the, I will say, conceptual amendment by Senator Peterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm in doubt because I only had 2 ayes. I didn't hear the rest of them. So we're going to ask for hands. All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Amendment passes, excuse me. Okay, are there any other amendments to this bill? Seeing none, we'll close the, that portion of it with the amendments. With the amendments and the way I counted this, and will you correct me, Jason and Connie? Amendment 6, Amendment 7, Amendment 8, Amendment 2, Amendment 1, and conceptual amendment by Senator Peterson all passed. Amendment 9 failed. Is that correct?
That's what I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this might be a newbie kind of question still, but I know when we have a House bill and we make that many amendments to a bill, we substitute it. Is that something you do with a Senate bill to clarify it? We should make a substitute bill, just so it cleans up the bill, so we don't have so many amendments inside the bill.
Jason?
That is a consideration the committee can make when you adopt a number of balloon amendments. If you make it a substitute bill, then the bill will appear clean, and you will not see the changes from the bill as introduced and what the committee did, but it will make the bill perhaps more readable on the Senate floor if you pass it out as a substitute bill. It's completely within the committee's discretion as to what they want to do.
Committee, what's your wishes on that? To make this a substitute bill, Senator Longbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we take the contents of Senate Bill 84 as amended and create a substitute bill and pass it out favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All in favor? Or do we have a second? Excuse me. Second. We have a second by Senator Peterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. We will then, and Jason, you can clean that bill up and give us a substitute motion, or substitute bill, is that correct?
Yes, you will have a committee report and a substitute bill attached to that committee report to be turned in.
Okay. With that, committee, thank you very much for your work today, and this committee is adjourned.